Hi, I'm Bryce Crittenden.
Hi, I'm Caroline Land, and welcome back to EPL's Overdue Finds.
Caroline, how's it going today?
I'm doing well, Bryce. How are you?
Pretty good, thank you. Pretty good. We were joking off air that this seems like it's been a very, very long week and already, but today I'm really looking forward to our conversation today because it is on a topic. It's on something that we haven't talked about too much before on the show, and that's kind of like, well, that is interactive storytelling. We're going to be chatting a little bit about video games today as well, and this seems like a great conversation to kind of rejuvenate us, I guess, this week. I want to say.
Yeah, I looking at the notes for this episode, I barely know what we're talking about, and I'm so excited about it. I cannot wait to find out because the words that I do know, I really like. So, I think I think this is going to be a fun one.
Of course, we are talking about interactive storytelling, and in particular, using a program called Twine. So that's something that I had to research as well before we started recording here today, and I still have a lot to learn about it. But we've got a couple of guests on today that I think are going to show us the ropes when it comes to Twine, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation. So first, we want to welcome back to the show. She is the manager of our Sprucewood branch, and of course, one of our favorite guests, as always, on the show, Kate Gibson. Kate, welcome back. How are you today?
Good, good. Thanks for having me back. I'm excited to talk about this.
Have you used Twine a lot?
Not a lot. Not I just learned about it through our other guest
Mhm.
and have started playing with it this past month.
So, of course, that other guest that we're talking about joining us today for the very first time, he's an Edmonton writer and is also the current Capital City Press featured writer. Please welcome to the show, Davis GC. Davis, how are you today?
Good. Yeah. Hello, listeners. I'm Davis, writer of fiction, poetry, and interactive fiction and video games. I really just love stories in all their forms and will write in whatever medium I think best suits the story I'm trying to tell.
So I have to quickly ask you, just of course, how we're recording today. We are, as usual, really over the last few months, we've all been remote. I'm looking at your kind of background right now, and it looks like you're also like a huge board games fan too. I see some Ticket to Ride and a few others. Do you have a current favorite board game right now?
Honestly, I haven't been playing a lot of board games lately because it's a little harder to, get together with friends around a table, or to justify doing that safely. So it's mostly been like two-player games that I can just play with my partner. What can I see here that is a good two-player game we've been playing? Actually, Ascension can go up to 4 players, but is good with 2 players as well. That's a great deck building game with a lot of excellent art in the cards. If you're a fan of something like Magic the Gathering, that is a good game that you can introduce friends to that concept without having them pay hundreds of dollars to, customize their deck and that sort of thing.
Now, Bryce, I know that you were working from home through the summer. When you were having online meetings, video meetings, how much thought did you put into what your background was?
Not too much, but every now and then, depending on the meeting, I'll try and switch it up. It also depends too on what I'm doing. So I had a meeting earlier today in my second bedroom, and I like the background in there a little bit better, but the acoustics not as good as out here in the dining room. So
I think this is definitely like a something we are thinking about in 2020 that maybe we hadn't done before or came out in other ways. Kate, how about you? What background do you like to have?
When I was working from home, like Bryce said, it kind of depended on what I was doing. If it was just a meeting with fellow coworkers, whatever room I was in at the time, trying to angle it so you didn't see how messy my house was. But when I was doing the recordings or hosting a program, like when I hosted Davis's first program, I set up actually in the corner of my bedroom, facing a bookshelf and a like nice walls, and the lighting is good. So you have to think about, yeah, where is your lighting source coming from? What is that all going to look like? Although I did do one program once, and I didn't think that I had my window open, my blinds open, and it was that time of evening when the sun was setting, and about halfway through the program, suddenly sun was just blaring straight into my face, and I just was like, that was not a good choice. So I lesson learned on that one.
I know what you mean. I also, too, just a really quick story about background. So earlier this summer, we did a trivia night through our adult summer reading club. So I was set up actually in our second bedroom here, and I've got like a big bookshelf there, and I've got like a lot of like DVDs and Blu-rays and stuff like that on it. And before I started, I had to go through, and I'm like, ooh, I don't know if people want to know that I own this. So I had to like rearrange certain things. So, I still got questions. Like I kept up like an Al Bundy Funko Pop figure, but I took down a couple of my Masters of the Universe ones. So yeah, it's all 2020 problems, I guess. All right. So before we really get into today's conversation about interactive storytelling, we, of course, are going to chat about our recent overdue finds. So Davis, since it's your first time on the show today, can you share with our listeners what you've been enjoying lately?
I just reread Microserves by Douglas Copeland, which is a novel about a group of Microsoft employees in 1993 who leave to start a small game development company. And I first read it in university, and it's interesting to come back to it years later, knowing so much more about the work culture that the book talks about, and thinking about what's changed and what stayed the same. And the book makes a lot of like predictions about the future, so it's a really interesting one to revisit.
So that one's based on a true story then, or is it kind of like a fictional retelling of it?
It's definitely fiction, but I know that the author has connections, or maybe he was living in that area at the time, and so he was talking to employees and was really struck by how weird and interesting some of the work culture in that area is. And that was sort of his inspiration. So lots of true factoids and things, but the characters are all fictional.
A lot of, when I think of Douglas Copeland, I think of a lot of his work is kind of art imitating life, imitating art. Like it kind of has that full circle on it where he captures stuff that is just so specific that then kind of becomes the stand-in for how it kind of got captured in pop culture.
All right, Kate, how about you? What have you been enjoying lately?
Well, I'm currently reading, and this will come as a surprise to no one, since it seems to always come up when I'm on podcasts. So I'm currently reading the Silmarillion by Tolkien, rereading it. Yeah, I'm one of those people who will read all the histories of Middle Earth and everything like that. But I actually just I just been watching a couple things that I thought I'd mention as well. One, I'm almost done the new Perry Mason that's on HBO, which is like a retelling of the early years of Perry Mason before the famous TV show that was in the 50s or whatever. So yeah, it's a really gritty retelling, very very much in the noir setting, and I'm really enjoying it. And then I also finished, and I feel like this is relevant to what we're talking about today. I just finished the third season of Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego, which, of course, was an amazing game back in the day, too. So I really enjoyed that on Netflix. And I know we don't have either of those things in our collection right now, but if you have access to those channels, they're both really good TV shows that I've been enjoying.
So I haven't actually seen the Carmen Sandiego show on Netflix. Do they use the same theme music from the game show?
Unfortunately not. I know. It's disappointing.
So
Although I do
disappointing.
like their theme music, it's not the same.
Is it more of like a serious take on kind of like, obviously I do know it's animated, but is it more of kind of like a serious take on Carmen Sandiego, or is it a little bit lighter?
It's definitely it's aimed at kids, although there's some like fighting and violence. I was surprised actually by how much violence there was in it when I first started watching it. But yeah, it's still got a lot of the interesting things. They have a character called Player, who is on a computer and guiding Carmen. So it kind of has that little conceit. And then she goes to different places and they tell you facts about the countries that she goes to. So it's pulling in stuff that like used to be on the show back in the day, and in the video game, but in a story form.
Just thinking back to that old game show from the early 90s, I don't think I ever once saw anybody like win that show. Like they always came close, but that was a hard show for kids to win.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I can't remember anyone winning. I definitely watched it back in the day.
No. Caroline, how about you? What have you been watching or reading lately?
Watching is a safe bet. You know, I love my movies, but this week I am going to talk about a book. So my book this week is Get a Life, Chloe Brown by Talia Hibbert. After surviving a near-death experience, Chloe Brown realizes that when her life flashed before her eyes, she saw nothing worth remembering. So determined to have an exciting life, she makes a list of all the things she needs to do to get a life, including moving out of her parents' house, going camping, which would not be on my list, and riding a motorcycle. She soon crosses paths with Red, the annoying, frustrating building superintendent at her new apartment complex, who just so happens to have a motorcycle. So she
What?
decides that he's going to be the guy to help her accomplish these things on her list. He reluctantly goes along with it, and soon she realizes that maybe he wasn't as annoying and frustrating as she thought he might be. So,
Lessons are learned.
oh
Is what you're
yes,
saying.
yes, all over the place. So, exactly.
So how old is the character of Chloe supposed to, like, how old is that character in the book?
She is, I want to say late 20s, early 30s. She lives with chronic pain, and that's one of the reasons she had been staying in her parents' house, which I believe is a mansion. So, there were reasons for why she was quite happy there. But out on her own, she's kind of forging her new path. She has a successful business that she does, but she just realized that there wasn't really that much exciting in her life, and Red might be able to help her with that.
Is that a fairly new book?
A new book in the last couple of years. Talia Hibbert is the author. So this is the first one. And then there is a sequel which just came out this year, and it's called Take a Hint, Danny Brown. And it's about Chloe's sister.
So the question is, obviously you enjoyed the book. Will you now be reading the sequel?
Oh, yeah, I've already started, and I'm very happy with it so far. It involves, not mistaken identity, but kind of like misunderstandings, and then people have to go along with it because of reasons and all of those good things.
Well, I look forward to hearing all about the sequel probably in, I'm going to say, 2 episodes from now.
That's a lot of pressure, but we'll see what I can do. How about you, Bryce? What have you been enjoying?
So actually, this week I have a graphic novel I want to let listeners know about. It's funny because I had read this right around the time that we had recorded our Unsolved Mysteries episode, and I was gonna talk about it during that one, but I was like, I don't know, that's too much true crime. So basically my graphic novel, it is called Green River Killer, a true detective story, and it's by Jeff Jensen. So this graphic novel probably came out, I want to say it's been probably close to 10 years now, but it's one of those books that I'd heard about before and just kind of never got around to reading. But the author Jeff Jensen, his father Tom was actually one of the lead detectives in the Seattle area in the 80s and 90s, and he had actually helped track down the Green River Killer, who was his real name is Gary Ridgway. So the graphic novel is actually told from his father's point of view and talks about the toll that the case took on himself. So, of course, his father, the victims' families, the community. It's very hard to read at times, and actually, it has probably one of the most disturbing kind of, I guess, passages or few pages I've ever seen in a graphic novel. So it's definitely not going to be for everyone. But if you are, I guess, a fan of true crime and it's a genre you enjoy reading, this one you'll probably want to pick up as well. And Caroline, when we were fortunate enough to chat with John Douglas last year, this was actually one of the cases that he had talked about where he actually nearly lost his life on while investigating investigating just due to the stress and everything around it. So obviously a little bit of a darker pick for me this week, but like I said, if you're a fan of true crime, definitely pick up the graphic novel. We have both the physical one and the ebook version in our collection. All right, so let's get into why we're here today. Of course, we're talking about interactive storytelling and all the different, themes around that. And Kate, as we mentioned at the top of the show, Davis is our current Capital City Press featured writer. I know you've been on the show before and you've talked about the Capital City Press featured writer program, but just for any new listeners that we have, can you share a little bit more about that program and really what Capital City Press is?
For sure. So, Cap City Press is EPL's way of supporting and promoting local writers, the local writing community, connecting people to each other, and just finding ways to highlight all the amazing things that are happening in our city. The featured writer program, we have 4 writers every year come in and do workshops with us, events, blogs, write book lists, a whole bunch of things. And it's just a way for them to, again, connect with the community through us and us through them, and promote them. So it's a really neat program. We're actually doing a call out for the next 4 right now until the end of October. You can get your letter of interest in to the Capital City Press team, and information for that can be found on the Capital City Press website. The Capital City Press does a whole bunch of other things as well. We have a physical collection now available at the new Milner Library, so you can go down and it's on the 2nd floor and check out physical books of local writers, among many other things that we do as well.
The one thing that's really cool about that program too is obviously Davis is our third featured writer here in 2020. But what's really neat about the program is, each year I kind of get the list from you, and I'm like, oh, you're like, here's the 4 writers this year, and each writer seems to kind of have their own different area that they kind of specialize in, I want to say, and no writer's the same, I guess. That's what I thought was really cool about the selection process.
I agree, and it really highlights how many different types of writers. There's not one type of writer out there. It's not just novelists, and that's one of the reasons why we also don't just say featured author. We want it to be any type of writing, and we want to highlight that. So we're trying to be as broad as possible and introduce people to maybe types of writing they didn't know existed before.
Davis, you mentioned a little bit about your writing earlier, but could you tell us a bit more about your background? And we were wondering, how long have you known you wanted to be a writer?
Pretty much my entire life, I guess. The earliest thing I remember writing was in 2nd or 3rd grade, a short story for class about a rabbit named Carrot Juice who loved carrot juice. And my class responded well to it. They were all laughing when I read it out loud in a good way, I'm pretty sure. And my teacher really liked it as well, and she encouraged me to pursue writing and recommended me for an elementary age writing workshop. And that kind of encouragement was really valuable. And I don't know if I would have continued writing without it. But I pretty much pursued writing real hard from then on up until university, where I backed off a little bit because I was worried. I think a lot of writers go through this. It comes time to commit and you think, oh, you can't actually make money writing, or it's really difficult. So I went to school for editing and publishing. And then I learned that, career prospects for that stuff, at least in Edmonton, not always the best either, and ended up falling back into writing anyways. But so it all worked out in the end.
I love it. I kind of hope somebody who's listening to this, maybe they're looking at getting a pet rabbit and maybe want to call their pet rabbit Carrot Juice, because that would be great. So Davis, you have a program coming up with us here on October the 21st called Twining Together, a community twine showcase. And it's something that we talked about at the beginning of the show. So it's something that I tried to read up on a little bit, and I'm still a little confused about it, but can you explain what Twine is all about?
For sure. Basically, it's a program for creating choice-based interactive fiction. So it's really easy to use, and it's allowed a lot of people without much technical knowledge to dip a toe into video game development. If you have any questions, feel free to ask and I can clarify more. But I think once you start playing with the program, it's really straightforward and it makes itself easy to understand.
So what are some of the, I guess, stories or programs or games that you've created on there?
Well, I've made a few things over the years. My sort of big game that you can buy on my itch.io is called Undone, and it's a big time travel adventure. I thought time travel was a really interesting way to sort of explore the choice-based format meaningfully. And then the game we're working on right now, because I wanted to do something new for our Twining Together event, is about a woman who has to use a mech to defend the space colony where she lives. I'm riffing on the kind of nonsensical mech anime trope where characters do battle while also hashing out their philosophical differences. So players make combat choices and rhetorical choices at the same time. Just do something a little more fun with the choice concept.
We are a big fan of time travel on Overdue Finds. I think we've had like 4 episodes on it. We've only done 67 episodes, 68 episodes. So we're kind of nearing the 10% mark of episodes have been done on time travel. So that sounds really fun. Kate, what I know you said you've kind of played around with it a little bit on there. What have you been doing, I guess?
Yeah, so I hosted Davis's first program, which kind of gave the basic rundown of how to use Twine, and that was really my first experience with it. I mean, at its most basic, it can be but it can be a choose your own adventure game is what it can be. And so I've been playing around with just what choices can lead to which, and which ones maybe lead back to the same eventual ending, and those kind of how to plan that all out. But then you can also do coding in there and add layers to it. So that's been really neat. And I'm not a coder. It's not something I've ever really done. I know basic HTML, but it's been interesting trying to learn a little bit more JavaScript to put that in there. So right now I've got like a little, almost like a prologue to just a fantasy RPG where you're in a tavern and this person comes in and then there's a fight and you have to make choices whether you help them or not. And then based on those choices, you either get invited to go on more adventures with them or you don't. So that's what I've been like playing with just to try out different codes and see what it does and how it affects it and if I am getting it even remotely like what I want. And I've also started plotting out maybe a bigger story because as you all know, November is NaNoWriMo, National Novel Writing Month. So I thought it might be fun to take a chance this year and try and do a few stories on Twine to try and hit my 50,000 word limit. And I feel like Caroline, I should bring up again because I know we've talked about this before, but you did a choose your own adventure once for NaNoWriMo. So I feel like I'm following in your footsteps.
I did do a choose your own adventure, and at the time, I did not know about Twine to know how I could have maybe have taken advantage of something that could have helped me. I was using basic decision making software for business decisions around if you do this then it creates a path. It looked a lot like critical path software, which helped. A lot of the ends ended up with everybody dying, so that just made that easier.
That's just choose your own adventure. I think that's what they always were. My worst memory of reading, you think, reading all these books over the years, I'd be freaked out by a bunch of things. But the scariest thing I ever read was a choose your own adventure where I was in a haunted house, I'm pretty sure, and I went to sleep on a bed, and when I woke up, I stepped off the bed, and something under the bed grabbed my ankle and killed me. And it traumatized me so that in the middle of the night, for years, I couldn't get off the bed. I had to jump off the bed far enough so that I didn't get caught by the thing under the bed. That was terrifying, but you always died in those books. Sorry. It still affects me, obviously.
Those books got really dark for kids. It was always ended in you somehow dying, or you'd get bludgeoned or crushed or eaten by something. And meanwhile it's 10-year-olds reading these things, but we couldn't get enough of that stuff though.
No, it's true.
yeah, when I was reading a bit more about Twine, that was Choose Your Own Adventure was the first thing that came to my mind. Was like, oh wow, this would be great. Like if you're starting out and you wanted to kind of write that type of story, it also seems like it'd be a really fun way too to share your writing with other people as well.
Yeah, it publishes as an HTML file, so anybody with a computer with access to any sort of web browser can play a Twine game if you send it to them. So it's very accessible on both ends.
And while I was looking up Twine, I saw that it had also been one of the things that was used to develop the interactive Black Mirror episode. So the series Black Mirror on Netflix had an interactive movie with, I think there were like a trillion different outcomes of the way things could go. And Twine was one of the software pieces that had been involved with the development of that.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what their process is, but Twine, it's also very visual. So even if you're just trying to plan out something like that and you don't plan on using just Twine, Twine's a good place to start, and you can really visualize all of your paths and see where everything goes.
Yeah, I really appreciate that part of it. I definitely need to see it and where all the choices lead to and what they might lead back to. Like I said, yeah, I find that really easy to use.
Davis, you've written video games, including for the puzzle game Otherworldly. What are some of the biggest challenges that you come across when writing a game that you might not come across when you're writing another form, like a poem or short story?
The biggest thing is that the game is not in service of the story. The story is in service of the game. So you might have written something really beautiful for your game's snow level, for example, but if the snow level gets cut because the ice physics aren't working or whatever, you've just got a deal. It's also not uncommon to be brought onto a project late into development to essentially tack a story onto a nearly finished game. It can be frustrating to be told that the player has to face X boss at level Y, and it's your job to figure out the justification. I think game stories work best when they're part of the conception of the game from the very beginning, and the mechanics reflect the themes of the writing, but we're not really at a point where every developer thinks that way yet.
Yeah, you're totally right. I can only imagine how hard it is to write maybe write like say a side mission for something and then only to have it get like cut out because either it doesn't work with the story or maybe there just isn't enough time to properly develop it.
Yeah, at the core of it, it's about like collaboration with other people, because I mean, you hear about solo devs who make these wonderful games all on their own, and that's always really impressive. But most of the time with video games, you're working with lots of other people who are doing the graphics and the programming and all this other stuff. And unlike when you're just writing a novel, you don't have full control over everything that's going on, and you have to capitulate to the needs of the project.
So, David, so speaking of video games, you recently wrote a list for us on epl.ca called Video Games for Book Lovers. And it's an awesome list, and we'll have a link to it in our show notes. So I have to ask, what are some of everyone's favorite stories in gaming or maybe some other interactive stories that you've played? Kate?
This one I really had to think about. I've played lots of video games over the years. Definitely, since I had a computer in my house. And it's funny, and some of the oldest ones that I played back when I was a kid stick with me the most. So I actually looked this up. We had a Sherlock Holmes game in the early 90s, and I couldn't figure out which one it was, but I finally found it. It was Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective. And that one had like actual like shot video of scenes, and it came with newspapers. So it was not just a video game; it was like interactive in other ways, and you had to scour the newspapers to find clues. So that is one of the earliest games I remember on the computer. It came out in '91. I don't think we had it in '91, but I think fairly soon after that. And so that, to me, those stories, because they were so interactive and you felt like you were actually, if I played it again, I probably would be like, oh, it's not as good as I remember it. But as a kid with new computer, this magical thing, it was such a thrilling story to kind of be a part of rather than just watching or reading. So that's kind of the big one for me. But then also like ones like that stick out to me is I didn't play Myst, but Riven, the sequel to Myst, I had that. So those kind of games where again you're part of the story and making choices. Those Those things really, really stuck with me, and same with now. Any game where I can have that kind of interaction with it. I recently bought Assassin's Creed Origin, not Origin, the one where it's in Egypt.
I know which one you mean. Yeah.
So I bought it, and it's fun to play, and the story's fine. But what I really love about that is that you can play it in like tourist mode, where you just wander around ancient Egypt and look at things. And so there's no story in that one, but I just love the fact that I can visit ancient Egypt through this video game, and that is so cool.
You're like, I could go on this really fun mission and try and like get this really cool old ancient artifact, but I'm just going to stroll this street market instead.
Yeah, look at all the things that are going on, all the statues, and it's so great.
Caroline, what about you?
Well, going back to what Kate was talking about earlier, Carmen Sandiego was a huge influence on me. We had it for our Apple II GS computer that we would play. And when I think back about what we were actually doing with gameplay, like it was a lot of like arrow up, arrow down, but it drew you into what was happening. Recently, I have really just started playing the game Speed Dating for Ghosts.
Oh, that's a great one.
I'm really enjoying it. I'm a character reader, and so it seems very character based as you meet these people or ghosts, I guess. And it has that same kind of choose element of responding to them as you're on these dates to kind of gauge how things go along. So, Speed Dating for Ghosts.
Davis, how about you?
Well, there are lots and lots of video games I could go with, but since we were talking about board games at the top of the show, I think I want to shout out a card game called Before There Were Stars, which is a storytelling game where you get cards and you use the concepts on the cards to slowly further along your story alongside with the other players. And it is really great because even people who are like nervous about sharing their stories in front of other people can have a lot of fun with it. The point system is very like positive and inclusive, and it's not just about like giving all the points to the person with the best story. It's you give points to people who maybe have like interesting concepts, or I really like that part here, have a point. And my friends, when we played it together, were really nervous about it. They tend to be more shy about sharing their stories, and I do have the reputation as the writer in our friend group, so like, I don't want to compete against the writer because he's going to have an advantage at the top of this. But they end up having a lot of fun, and I think anybody if you like telling stories around a campfire or something, it's a very similar vibe.
But it almost kind of sounds, the way you're describing it, kind of like social media in a way, where it's like you say something or you share something, and then people kind of can throw you points if they like it.
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah, it's the difference between the game and social media is that it's all about the positive. Nobody's going to leave you hate comments on your story in this game.
That's good. You don't want to play a board game and have to block somebody out of your life for anything.
Yeah. Bryce, what about you? What stories do you like?
It's a book that actually I have on my bookshelf, and I haven't finished reading it. I started it a couple years ago. It's called, I think it's just called S, and it's by J.J. Abrams. And I want to say it probably came out or maybe around 2013, 2014. But basically, it's this book. It looks like an old school library book. It's got like the sticker on the spine on it. But what sets this book apart from others is that inside the book, there's all these little like clues that are hidden within it. So you'll be reading this book, and then after a few pages, there'll be like a postcard. And on this postcard, it'll be talking about this mystery that you kind of have to solve while you're reading this book. So I really want to go back and finish it. I started it and never did, but I always thought that was such a really cool concept for a book. And then as far as like gaming goes, I know this is a game that I've talked about a few times on the show, but I I love the story of it, and that is the Red Dead Redemption series. So that's from Rockstar Games, and they also made the Grand Theft Auto games as well. And in both games, basically feature a character by the name of James Marston, and you actually, you really get attached to this character. And I think sometimes with a lot of these games that, if it's a Western or Grand Theft Auto or whatever, you've got your mission, you go do it, you shoot up the place, and that's it, and you move on to the next level. This one, just kind of through the two different games, you grow attached to the character, who is definitely flawed, obviously, because he's wanted by the law. But at the same time, this is kind of one of those characters where family is very important to him. And it's definitely a flawed hero because, you definitely find yourself, obviously you're controlling this character, but you want nothing but the best for him and his family, obviously, while kind of going on some adventures. But the story that they're able to tell with it and kind of take the more highbrow route versus just like, some games where you just run in and shoot stuff. It was the whole series was really well done by Rockstar.
Was Red Dead Redemption, was that the one where you have a horse?
Yes.
Yeah, and you have to feed your horse and buy it like apples. And that's also the game too, where you can go and just pet a random dog in the street too, which is always fun.
I love those kind of elements. Like one of the things I see online quite a bit. I follow a lot of people who game, and the Dragon Age games. I have only played the first one. I do want to play the rest of them. But it's amazing to me how into the characters people get of these stories, and to me that's a sign of a good storytelling, is people start to care about these characters. And you see people talking about there's rumors of another Dragon Age game coming out, so people are starting to talk about the characters again, and it's amazing, like that culture that grows up around those things. I think it's awesome.
Dragon Age 2 also developed here in Edmonton by BioWare.
Mm-hmm.
Before we get to our roundtable questions, Bryce, can you share what we'll be chatting about on our next episode?
Yeah, so Caroline, we don't get to do these very often, but we're going to be bringing you an episode next week, a special bonus episode of Overdue Finds. Of course, the Stanley Cup Finals just wrapped up, and Edmonton was lucky to play host. But a lot of people have questions about kind of what went on behind the scenes. How is Edmonton selected? What were some of the big lessons learned by hosting such a big event here in Edmonton? And of course, the biggest story was probably that, after 200 days or whatever it was, nobody in that bubble had a positive COVID test. So the whole kind of bubble city thing was an incredible story. And so we actually have a couple of guests from the Edmonton Oilers front office, Jody Young and Stuart Ballantine, who they're going to be on chatting with us, giving us some behind the scenes detail about kind of how the hub city all came together. Got some interesting hockey themed questions all lined up for them. So yeah, we're going to be doing something a little bit different on next week's episode.
Yeah, I'm really excited to talk with them and find out more about how everything came to be and how it went from their perspective. And it's kind of cool that it was like a neighbor to the library, because the library is part of the downtown core of Edmonton, and that's where the bubble was. And yeah, I'm looking forward to learning more about it.
Yeah, it's funny because one of our guests, Jody Young, he's actually a friend of mine. So over the course of the summer, we'd be chatting quite a bit, and I would hear little things that they were having to consider, and it was such a really neat story. So I'm really glad we've got a couple of people from the Oilers to come on and chat about that whole experience. I think listeners will really enjoy it. So, quick roundtable questions. Davis, I'm going to start with you. Let's say you're asked to create a video game based on any book you've ever read. Which book are you turning into a game?
This almost feels like cheating, but Player of Games by Ian M. Banks, which is about a guy who travels to a foreign planet to play a large-scale game that the society uses to determine who will become emperor. Most of the plot moments are matches played against antagonists, so there's lots of gaminess baked in. The only challenge is figuring out the actual mechanics, which are only described vaguely in the book.
Sounds like it'd be a really fun game. Lots of twists and turns. Kate, how about you?
I struggled with this one. I mean, as you all know, I read a lot of fantasy, and I feel like that those get turned into video games or things similar. Like Lord of the Rings has many games. Obviously, Harry Potter had many games. So I was trying to think of something like different that I don't like. Maybe haven't been turned into games before, and I don't know. Maybe I'm being silly, but I was like, what if there was a choose your own adventure style Twine game where it's like Hamlet, but it's like, what if Hamlet had decided to like trust the ghost right away and try and kill Claudius, and then you like follow a path. I thought, making Hamlet, especially because a lot of people complain that he doesn't make any decisions until the end of the play. So I was like, oh, what if he actually had made decisions during the play? So maybe I'll write that story for my Twine over NaNoWriMo, but probably not.
Immediately, I'm like, can Ophelia be a playable character? Because I have some other decisions she could make.
Yeah.
Caroline, how about you? What what book are you turning into a game?
Well, my answer was California Dreamin', which is a graphic novel about the life of Cass Elliot, aka Mama Cass from the Mamas and the Papas. So we are going to go into the 60s folk scene as people make very interesting decisions about which rock group they're going to hook up with and which coast they're going to explore. And it's going to be pretty groovy, I would say.
Now, I'm sure then that there would have to be a level where maybe you experiment with some mind bending drugs and maybe the whole level is kind of all like wavy and stuff. I think that'd be a fun level, I think.
Absolutely. And then there would be another level that's just dressing Mama Cass because she had the best outfits. What about you, Bryce?
So this one's going to be kind of a dark pick, and I'm in no way making fun of this book at all. But the one I thought of that would make for a fun game, I think, would be The Road by Cormac McCarthy. Just because I think there's one of the games I loved the most as a kid was kind of like the old school scroll kind of like beat 'em up games like Double Dragon and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So I'm thinking it's like a 2-player game and you get to play as the dad and the son and you're walking through this wasteland, and of course you have to like get supplies, so then you have to like beat up other people on their journey. Like I said, very dark, but I would 100% play that game if somebody's thinking about making it.
The Road was a big inspiration for The Last of Us, so not such a wild idea, but it seems like you're taking a different take on it.
Yeah, exactly.
And The Last of Us was one of the titles that was on your list in the catalog, video games for book lovers.
Yeah, that's one of those games too. As an Xbox player, I'm totally jealous that I can't play it on Xbox. It's like a PlayStation exclusive. So I've never played the game, but I definitely want to. All right. So Thanksgiving is this weekend. We're going to go a little sentimental here for a second. So it's been a challenging year for everyone. But what, I guess, is one thing that you are thankful for this year? And Kate, I'm going to start with you on this one.
There's many things. That's the thing. It's been a hard year, a challenging year, as you say, but there's been a lot of things that have been in place that have made it interesting or bearable. But obviously, the first thing that came to mind, aside from my family, because I have to say that, no, it's not because I have to say that, but I have to say it because it's true. But I think, like, honestly, we're talking over this thing, and we're watching each other, and we're able to do this podcast, and so maybe I don't know, the technology that's allowed us to have to isolate but not be completely alone. And so we're able to continue doing a lot of things and talking to each other face to face through these sort of services. I think that's been so good. If we didn't have this and we were forced to stay at home and not see each other, it would have been a lot harder.
Definitely. Davis, how about you?
Definitely related to what Kate said. I was going to say my writing group, the New Cambrians. Before all this, we would meet twice a month in person, but now we've moved to meeting over video chat, and even that's been some of my only reliable human contact over the past many months. Definitely kept my mental health above level, so really grateful for them and for our ability to continue to meet.
Nice. Caroline, how about you?
I would say the friends who live here in the city, like Kate, like you, Bryce. My family is mostly from, entirely out of Edmonton, and so being able to have a great group here who supported me this year and listened and cheered me up when I needed it was really important, even if we couldn't always do face-to-face or in person. When we were able to sit outside in a park or something, it really, really made the difference for me this year. And then on another note, I've been really grateful for the online streaming content available through the Edmonton Public Library. It got me through some long days this year.
It's like I was talking to my mom on the phone probably a couple of weeks ago, and I think we were talking about like just kids having to go back to school and everything, and and she was like, I can't imagine, like I grew up in the 80s. She was like, I can't imagine what that would have been like if this had happened in like say 86 or 87 or something like that, and no streaming services, no no Zoom or anything like that. So technology to the rescue.
Mm-hmm.
I think for myself, like a couple things. Like one, I'm very kind of like what Kate said, very thankful we're still able to kind of chat with different people, and through things like what we're doing right now. We're using a program called Squadcast to record our podcast. So we've been very lucky and fortunate enough to kind of be able to do the podcast during everything that's been going on. So that's been great. And then also too, just with, it's going to be really interesting, I think, moving forward. I think people now are going to start taking things like having a cold or the flu a little bit more seriously, hopefully. And, I think, and I was definitely guilty for this before, where, if I got the sniffles, I'd be heading into work. And which now I look back on, it's just like, oh my God, that's just horrible. We shouldn't be doing that anymore. So I think that's one thing I'm kind of thankful for, I guess, is I think as a society, well, most of us anyway, are starting to take that stuff a lot more seriously, and try not to make each other sick.
I agree. And it's funny, I've said this to some of my coworkers here, working in public service and with the public, I did catch colds quite often. It was just a thing that happened, and it wasn't a big deal, but it definitely happened. I have not been sick, not even not COVID, but just any sort of sick since March. I think I got sick over the winter back, I don't know when, but I have literally not even had a sniffle since then. And it's like, oh, washing hands, wearing a mask, those kind of things actually do help. And so it'll be interesting to see going forward, hopefully when COVID, it's not a big issue anymore. If I do have a sneeze, but I do want to come into work, will I wear a mask and just be, conscious of how my germs might be spreading? So it'll be, I'm really interested to see what the impact of all this is going to be down the road.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you both taking the time to talk with us. Kate, where can writers go to find out more about joining Capital City Press?
If you can go to the website, www.epl.ca/Capital City Press, and check out all the things going on, as well as, like I said, the call for featured writers that is currently posted.
And there is also, as Kate mentioned earlier, the in-person collection at the new Stanley Milner Library. So when you go check out all the exciting things there, make sure that is one of the ones on your list. Davis, where can listeners go to follow your work or purchase some of your games?
You can grab my games at davisgc.itch.io, and I have some short stories and other more traditional writing available to read for free over at patreon.com/davisgc.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you haven't done so, we encourage you to hit the subscribe button so that you automatically get new episodes. Please also leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, and more importantly, tell a friend about the show.
Yeah, don't forget that we are going to have a link to everything that we talked about in today's show notes, including a couple of lists and blogs that Davis wrote for us, and links to some of his games too. We would love to hear from our listeners, and you can reach us on Twitter at epl.ca and use the hashtag EPL Overdue Finds so we can find your message. You can also email us at podcast@epl.ca. We love getting those emails from listeners. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.